And welcome to another great edition of the UFE Ultimate Fan Experience. I'm your host, Colin Crandall. So excited to have this next guest on the show and get a chance to speak with him for the first time. A longtime fan. The guy's amazing. I don't know anyone that doesn't like this man. He is the action man, Chris Curtis. Welcome to the show, Chris.
Thanks a lot, man. Sorry it's taking so long to get this done, guys. We've been trying for a while, but I am the worst person with keeping a schedule, so I really apologize.
That's okay. No apologies needed, man. I know you're busy and a lot of people want to talk to you, and I really appreciate you taking the time to talk to me.
Man, it's not even like people want to talk to me. It's just that like I'm doing a lot more, and I really can't keep a schedule. I'm the worst person. So like yeah, I had to like set 3 alarms today. Like all right, like make sure I don't forget this time.
Absolutely. I know that feeling when people are pulling you in different directions. It's tough. I've noticed one thing for me is like I always have really good ears. And even if I'm going to bed with earplugs, I can usually always hear my alarm clock. And I don't know if I'm getting older or it's just too much on my mind, but lately I haven't even been hearing my alarm clock, which really sucks because now I find myself waking up like 3 hours earlier going, no, no, I didn't miss the alarm. And I'm like, oh no, going back to bed an hour later, waking up again. Oh no, I didn't miss the
The
alarm.
alarm fear, yeah, it's always fun. I love
Yeah.
that. Yeah,
Oh yeah, I'm like
I
I gotta
absolutely
get
love
over
that.
that. But yeah, man, keeping schedules is tough. Well, Chris, so many questions to ask you, man. You got a big fight coming up on September 16th against Anthony Fluffy Hernandez, and so that means you're definitely in training camp. How's it going so far, and who are some of the people that are helping you for this camp?
Camp's been fun. It's been good, man. Like for me, I usually train 7 days a week anyway. So we don't really start my camp until like a few weeks out because I gotta keep a pretty crazy schedule normally. So we're kind of just now getting in that camp phase. My weight's great, 200 pounds. Like I feel great. Full food. It's been great, man. It's my regular coaches, Eric Nixick, Gil Martinez, James Gifford, Nate Pettit. And then I've got Sean Strickland, of course, is always there as a training partner. But we got a lot of guys fighting right now in the gym, so it's great. Like I've got Strickland, I've got Brad Tavares, Albert Durayev stayed in town to help out. He's a phenomenal wrestler. We got a lot of guys who are bouncing in town. Sadi Boo's got his PFL fight coming up. So he's just been helpful working on some different stuff. Uh, Gabriel Checo and John Poppy have been really, really great for helping me with grappling and wrestling. He's getting those rounds in. So I mean, we got a room full of killers, and it's really nice. Like it's kind of worked out nicely, and got a lot of up and coming guys coming out like Shimon's. The guy 170 kid, he's fought contenders before from Israel. It's a really, really good training partner to have. So we've got it's a room full of talent, man.
Absolutely. I had a great interview with Coach Nixick about 4 months ago, and really great coach. It's interesting how he was doing it for so long. Like he's been at Extreme Couture, I think, probably for 20 years or something like that. And like little by little, he just starts like really killing it. And all of a sudden, I remember it was probably maybe what 4 years ago or something. All of a sudden, the commentators all start mentioning Eric Nixick, and everyone's like, "Who is this? Why are we hearing this name so much?" And then all of a sudden, it's like his players are just killing it. And I think he's probably respected as one of the best coaches out there today after years.
He should be, man. Like you guys don't know how much I like, how much the fact, even you mentioning that with like, for years kind of went unsung,
Yep.
and then people started taking note. Like I love that. And Eric's a guy who's there every day. Eric spends, I mean, there's a running joke in our gym. When we see Eric's wife, we all apologize because he's like here, like he's with us all the time. Like
Nice.
Eric has been at fights on his anniversaries, on her birthdays. Like hell, I think it's their last anniversary. He was at one of my fights.
Damn.
And like so every time we see Andy, we all apologize for like taking Eric. But
I
I
like it.
mean, oh, Andy's great because like she lets us, do whatever.
That's
But it's great for me. I love it because I did a lot of my career, kind of with no like, recognition for it, and then to kind of have it finally get recognized myself for like the things I've done. Like, I understand how awesome that is. Like Eric's a guy who's there. I've known a lot of coaches. Some coaches come in, teach their class, clock out, and they're done. Eric's there all day, every day. If you ever need anything, he's there. Like Eric really puts his heart and soul into his work. And
Yeah,
it's really cool to see him like get the recognition and people take notice of like, man, he's the real deal.
absolutely. And so you guys are kind of birds of a feather in that regard, having paid your dues for a good while and flown under the radar, and then all of a sudden, boom, people know who you are and are like, hey, this guy's really good. So that's
And
cool.
yeah,
You can
it's
relate.
it's 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 cool to see that and like to see like it's not success isn't linear and it's not success isn't linear and it's not uniform for all people. So
Yep.
some people will get heralded early, some people will get whatever really early, and some people have to work longer. And just because you worked longer doesn't mean you weren't as good. It just means your time hasn't come yet. So definitely something I've kind of learned from Eric in that regard is like success isn't a linear thing. It's not uniform across the board. So that's we've had long talks about this. That's definitely helped a lot.
Absolutely. Very well said. Someone told me the Irishman, Ian Gary, is doing some training with you guys. Is that true, or did I get that information?
No, I actually went out to train with Ian. He hit me up. I love Ian the dad. He's a freak. So I actually hated Ian Gary the first time I ever saw Ian Gary. Like we debuted the same night, and I hated Ian Gary. But
Wow.
actually, like when I do, I unfortunately I think just being Irish, every Irish fighter kind of gets the Irish curse from McGregor to where
Yep.
like he kind of let the bad taste. So we immediately take out our McGregor hate on other Irish fighters.
Yep.
But I actually, like, the more I met Ian, the more I liked him. Like he's cool. I love him. I love his wife, and he's a really good dude. So I went out there to kind of help him out. He was supposed to be fighting Jeff
Yep.
Neal. He's like, hey man, I got a week of sparring. He come out, just same size, like same, whatever. I was like, yeah, man, sure. So I went out to Killcliff for a week. And he's fun times, man. Ian's good. Like he's actually a lot better than I ever gave him credit for. So I will say that he's way better than I gave him credit for.
Very cool. And I like the fact that you can sometimes go to different gyms. When I was talking to Coach Nixick, he said you guys do have relationships with several good gyms because one thing I have been hearing for the last couple of years is a lot of fighters would mention with so many fights at the Apex and in Las Vegas that they would go and get great training from Extreme Couture. And it was unusual because usually you weren't hearing that. No matter where someone was traveling to, they just either had their guys with them or they didn't get any training. And all of a sudden, you start hearing all these guys saying extreme couture, extreme couture. And Coach Eric mentioned that you guys have a good relationship with like several other teams, and your guys can go there, they can come to you guys, and it's just a really good, kind of a camaraderie and friendship and mutual respect. And with all the fights in the West Coast, it looks like you guys have made yourself available to the other guys in the UFC if they want some training. Do you feel good about that? Do you think that's a good thing, or do you think that's sometimes a weird thing for you when
I
you got?
love it.
Yeah,
I love it. I've fought guys who I've had guys come in to train and turn around and want to fight me. And I'm like, cool, but we're in a sport with a very limited pool of bodies sometimes.
yeah,
So there's going to be carryover. It's fine. There's going to be crossover. It's fine. You're going to end up fighting guys that you've trained with, and it happens, man. My thing is when guys are younger, I think in your career, I think it's kind of more like important to be like, okay, like don't train with people because you're trying to get up there or whatever. But once you reach a certain level, you can Google like all of my fights from the
right,
last like 5 years. You can easily Google. So I always say if I'm gonna win a fight by trying to by relying on surprising you, then I didn't train properly. I trained for a gimmick instead of the fight. Like
thanks.
so, I've fought people I train with. It's fine. But like one of the things with Eric is that coming from like a football background, Eric has that football like mentality, that locker room mentality, to where like like come in, work is work, and like Eric's a bro. If you guys don't know Eric Nixon, Eric's one of the biggest bros you'll ever meet. I say in the best way possible, but he's just big, loud, like friendly ginger who's there to everybody. So it's really
Oh,
cool because we do have kind of an open door policy at Extreme, man. And we've had a lot of guys come over and who are like, I would love to cross train more and more. And with that, we've had the door open to us to a lot of places. Like I was out down at Killcliff. Henry Hooft is a freaking legend and one of like my favorite fighters of all time.
yeah,
And Henry Hooft is like, yeah, man, come out. Like, sure. I fought 3 guys at Killcliff and nothing but love. Like, great group of guys. I was out there for a week. Coolest group of guys we run into. Like, super welcoming. And like, we're moving away from that 1990s mentality, early 2000s mentality of like it's us versus them. I'm like, guys, like we're past that, and like some places still do it, But I think a lot of the big gyms are like, it doesn't have to be us versus them. Like sometimes it's going to be carryover. It's just part of the job. It's nothing personal. It's part of the job. Keep it moving. And like, I think it's really cool to kind of see like Eric and Coach Henry have like be advanced enough and forward thinking enough to be like, it doesn't have to be us versus them.
I like that. I like that a lot. I think it makes for a better atmosphere, and it gives you guys all kinds of opportunities. Iron sharpens iron, and to have different pieces of iron there to sharpen yourself with is all a good thing. Make some friends and like that, and you know. So I see you're from Cincinnati, Ohio originally. Did you spend most
Yep.
of your life there, and you're in Vegas now for X amount of time, or were you living in different places throughout your travels?
I was born, shoot, from what? Born till I think I left Cincinnati initially when I was probably I started traveling more when I was about 27. 20, but yeah, roughly about 27. I started training in California, like back and forth. I would go out there for like a few months at a time. Live with Sam Alvey actually. I go live with Sam Alvey for a while for camps. Then I come back, I do stuff, come back home, and then I go back out to Flood, California. And I did that for probably about 4 years, going home, California. And then 2019, I moved to Vegas. When I got signed to PFL for that, I moved to Vegas, and I've been in Vegas ever since.
Very cool. Vegas is a pretty cool place. Different climate than Ohio, that's for sure.
Oh
But
God,
you know,
I'll never leave Vegas. I love this place. Like I love the weather. It's hot, but there's no humidity. It's fine. Like I can do anything I want. It's like the best parts of California and New York kind of rolled into one. I got
yeah,
warm air, warm climate, everything else, but I've got like I can order if I want Thai food at 3 a.m. I can order Thai food at 3 a.m. If I'm bored at midnight, I can go out and do whatever. So I love Vegas.
excellent. It's a great place to be. You ever look at the old TV shows when Vegas had like 2 hotels and then like 6 hotels? You imagine how different that was, man. It's crazy to see that stuff.
I always laugh because it's just changed so much. But when I've had friends and stuff come out from back home, it's always funny because like I living in Vegas, one of the running jokes is movies don't understand what Vegas looks like. It's
Right?
like in every movie you see like Vegas from top down, like driving into Vegas through the desert, and then it's just a strip. And we
Yep.
all laugh like that is not what Vegas is like. Like,
Yeah,
so we always laugh that like every movie doesn't understand what Vegas looks like. It's hilarious.
absolutely. So, how did you get into fighting, man? Were you doing anything as a kid or a teenager? Let me know a little bit about your background. Did you wrestle? Did you do karate? Did you do judo? And was there anybody in your family that had done this? And what did your family think when you started to really embrace combat sports?
Oh God, oh man. So my family thought I was insane because literally I'm a son of doctors, of two doctors, and like they're just like, what are you doing? My brother is a pharmacist. My sister man helps run a casino, and like they're just like, well, big your business. They just like, what are you doing? But for me, when I was young, man, I was big like karate. I started with like karate and I started with like karate when I was young, but I didn't do that for long. And that's I started doing taekwondo. And then I was like, screw that. I went back to like started like self-teaching myself karate. Like, fuck it, I want to be that guy. Because all I've ever cared about was fighting. All I've ever cared about was fighting.
Uh,
So I had karate and taekwondo when I was little. And then I started boxing when I was like 12. And that happened because I got beat up every day by a guy. And I realized in seventh grade, I got to a fight every day with this kid, Raphael. And he kicked the shit out of me every day. And finally, I gave up, and I'm like, okay, karate doesn't work. Like, what do I do? So I started boxing. I started messing around with the boxing gym when I was 12, and I did that for a while. But I was never really committed to anything. And like, my mom's like, you need to do school, so I didn't really like do that as much as I wanted. And I wish I'd wrestled. I wrestled for like half. I wrestled for like half a year in high school as a freshman. And I was like, nope, not for me.
nice.
And in hindsight, I regret that. Like, I regret
Yeah.
that deeply. Like, oh, I should have stepped like stay with that. But I kind of just wandered around doing stuff for a long time. Go ahead.
Yeah, sorry to interrupt you. One of the things that's interesting about that is your takedown defense is so great. A lot of people kind of look at it as like, who are the best wrestling takedown defense? Justin Gaethje, Chris Curtis, and Gaethje, was like a D1 All-American like 3 or 4 times. How is your takedown defense as good as like a 4-time D1 All-American?
Extreme Couture. So honestly, skip around here for a second. My wrestling defense was traditionally, like historically, been pretty spotty, like really fucking, like really spotty. And when I moved to Vegas, I was training at a different gym, and I was training at Extreme, a different gym for a while, going back and forth. And finally, I moved over to Extreme full time, and that was like right during like the pandemic. So everybody's trading in secret. And I was actually working out Puna Soriano had a fight coming up, and I was like, "Oh, just help Puna get ready for his fight." So with Puna, yeah, is one of his coaches was Nate Pettit, who's my coach now as well. And I'm working out with Puna, and Nate's like, "Your wrestling sucks." And Nate's just like, "Your wrestling's terrible." Like Nate would bully me on the wrestling mat. So during the entire pandemic, I'm wrestling like 4 or 5 times a week. Nate's just like every day making me wrestle, making me do stuff. And like honestly, being a striker, the way I'd always been taught wrestling was from the like the view of a striker, like defend the takedown and whatever. So it's always my wrestling was always defensive. I think Nate was really the first guy who was like, we didn't do defensively wrestling, like defensive wrestling. He's like, no, we're just gonna wrestle. Like we're gonna wrestle. So like I started wrestling like as a whole, not just as a defensive wrestler. You know, like I started taking people down, working everything. And once you kind of have that level of comfort with like wrestling as a whole and not just trying to stop takedowns, that your mindset about wrestling changes. And I think for me, that kind of unlocked like, oh, like it's if you train me my entire if you train someone their entire career to like, okay, don't get taken down. If you get taken down, you lose. You'll be really good at stopping the takedown, but you're gonna be tearing your entire thought process is gonna be, I can't go down, I can't go down, I can't go down. And like with Nate, I finally happened to where like now it wasn't so much as don't get taken down. It's just don't lose, don't don't lose the position. Don't lose the scramble. So now I'm not terrified of being taken down. I can just wrestle. Like, if you take me down, I don't care. Like you can't hold me down. And you're not gonna like submit me. So now like that was the entire like the spark that changed like my ability to wrestle. Because like I got I got out wrestled in PFL like freaking every fight almost.
Yeah.
Even ones I won, I got out wrestled in. So that was probably the big thing, like the biggest change.
Makes sense. How many years have you been with Extreme?
Full time, like going on 3. Overall, about 4.5.
So it seems like coming into the UFC kind of coincided with you getting over to Extreme because 2021 was your first UFC fight. So it sounds like you had been full time with Extreme for a year before that, and then you had been part time with Extreme for maybe a year before that. Is that about right?
Yep. Yeah, I had like a big, I had like a what, like a 6 or 7 fight streak going on when I got signed. And I think all but the first one, my first fight after PFL, I was with Extreme full time, and like just made the switch over because I was still I was even training there then. So that's when I started to make the move over, but I was still kind of half and half. Uh, but even for that fight, mostly I was at Extreme, and like yeah, man. So post PFL, I knew I had to make some changes. I really wasn't happy with like the way PFL unfolded, and I was just disappointed with myself. On top of that, like it's a fight, so you have to take responsibility for your shortcomings. So I recognize I didn't, I lost. At the same time, I felt like I was really like trained badly and prepared badly for that fight. And I was like, I need to do something different. I'm older. I don't have much time in the sport left. So I pulled the trigger and I went to Extreme full time, and no regrets.
Nice. And what was your thoughts back then? What were your thoughts, rather? Was the UFC always the end game for you? And this is going to be a two-part question. Was UFC always the end game for you in your mind? And then part two of that question, it was. And then part two was, did you ever start worrying that time was going to run out before you got there? And where was your thought in 2021 when you got that call up? Was it a miracle? Were you sure you were going to get there? So two parts. Was it your end game? And where was your head at as we kept getting fight after fight after fight after fight after fight after fight outside the UFC?
First up, absolutely, the UFC was always my end game. I always wanted to be a UFC fighter. And I didn't want to be a guy who fought in the UFC. Like I always say, you get guys who come in and they'll lose like all their fights, and then you see UFC vet behind their name, and that kills me. Like no, like you get like you're a UFC vet when you win. And my goal was always to be a UFC fighter because I before I got signed, I've beaten guys who were there. I've beaten guys who were saying they were going to get the call. I beat a bunch of guys who went up and who got called before I did. And it killed me, man, because like I wanted there's a certain level of prestige that comes with being a UFC fighter, especially like a high ranking one. Now I always wanted to be there. I always It's a little bit different now than when I started. You guys gotta remember when I started, UFC was clearly number one. There's no like question, whatever, blah blah blah. Now you got places like One and like PFL doing big things, Bellator doing big things, but the divide was much much steeper when I was younger. So it was like the pinnacle, absolute no question, was UFC. You had to be there. You had to be there. You had to be there. And I came up with guys, trained under guys who were signed. And that was always my goal. Like always my goal. I had to be there. I wanted to see, not just to be a UFC fighter, I wanted to see how far I could go. And my biggest thing for me was doing this. Without getting to the UFC, I would feel like I would never have gotten the answer if I stopped. What was my limit? Like where was my ceiling? And that was important to me to figure out, because like having to walk away from something, everybody has to walk away at some point. Like time catches everybody, it happens. But having to do that before I ever got to figure out if what my limit was the scariest thing in the world for me. I never wanted to do that because I didn't want to be that guy who's sitting on a bar stool looking at his drink thinking about like what could have been.
Yeah.
Besides that, like, oh man, so that was 20. Eric Nixick laughs because right when I got signed, about a month before that, about a month and a half before that, we lost a teammate. He had bicep surgery, and he died in his sleep from a blood clot.
Oh no.
And it rocked the gym. And it sucks because like Extreme's really close, man. So it's a really like everybody's got their kids in there. Like we've all got kids. Like our kids playing around playing. I got a kid on the way. I can't wait for him to be at the gym with the other little kids. And like every kid in the gym grows up with a room full of uncles and aunts who love them. And it's crazy, you wake up one day and he's just gone. He's absolutely gone. And his daughter, we had other teammates bring his daughter to the gym, and you're just like, I left Ohio years before that, and I have a son already. My son's 15. And moving away from my son was probably the hardest thing I've ever had to do in my entire life. And I'm at a point now where it's great if I can fly him out and do whatever. But leaving Ohio and having access to my son all the time was probably the worst thing in the world for me. That's still probably the hardest thing for me, is like knowing, there's so much of his life that just wasn't there for because I was pursuing something. And we talk every day. We play video games every night. Like we talk every night, we're still very close, but like as a father, it kind of hurts to see the things that I missed out on. And watching, seeing like you can just be gone in your sleep overnight really had me questioning what was going on, because I went on contenders before that, won highlight reel knockout, and didn't get signed. Now they, you can win a decision, they'll sign you. But I was once again on the time to win like 2 contracts a night, max, period, and all that. So I get a knockout, don't get signed, go to PFL, I win $1 million, the entire thing implodes, goes badly. And so I come back at the PFL and, I go on a freaking tear, man. I'm on like a 6-7 fight tear, go running through things, nothing, like quiet still. And then we just see a friend die. You're just like, maybe I should go home. Like I could die, tomorrow. And, like I've lost all this time with my son. What do I do? And that was hard, man. So I literally talked to me and Eric had sat down and talked about a month, probably about 5 weeks before I got signed. And I was like, I don't know what to do, man. I'm terrified. I'm like early 30s. I haven't gotten signed. I don't think I'm gonna get signed. I'm just like, I don't know what I'm gonna do, man. Like, do I keep pursuing it and lose the last few years I have left with my son? Or do I what do I do? Shoot, man, I had what? Oh my God, bro. I had like $30 to my name at the time too. And I'm just like, what am I doing? Like, do I go home, get a job, like have these last few years, just, just let it go? And Eric's like, I understand what you're saying, because we were all hurting when this happened. and he's like, "Give me to the end of the year." He's like, give me the end of the year." He said, "Let's hit it. Let's just keep going. If it doesn't happen," he's like, "Yeah, man, let's go home. Like, there's no shame in it." So gave it to the end of the year. I was like, okay, end of the year, and then that'll be it. I was prepared to like, okay, like I've got to be a dad. I want to have those last few years, whatever. And then 5 weeks later, $7, it's like about $37 in my bank account. I get a call from the UFC, and I'm like, oh my god. And they called me, and they were like, "Can you?" Because I literally just got home. I just eaten. Which is a Thursday because I remember that because this crazy little Brazilian like spinning kicked me in the head and like I was like rocked hard. Like I was like, man, like seeing stars. I was definitely concussed. So I went home, ate, showered. Right when I laid down just to watch TV, my manager, I was with my manager Lance at the time, comes upstairs. He's like, "Can you make weight tomorrow?"
Oh, oh,
I'm
oh.
like, I'm like, "Yeah, why?" He's like, "There's a fight. Like, if we make weight tomorrow, we're on." So we hit this sauna. So it's funny. So I said yes. So I went to go take a run, right? I was just going to run it off. I immediately twist my ankle about probably 400 yards into the run. I twist my ankle.
Oh.
So we go to the pool, make weight. So we show up the next day, we make weight. So mind you, I've had a concussion and an ankle injury. And I was
Oh.
like, screw it, we're in. We make weight, we're on the scale, fight gets canceled, gets pushed
Oh.
back.
Oh.
So then they pushed it back for a month. And I'm like, you know what? Fine, because I had a concussion and like a twisted ankle. I was
Yeah.
like, probably the best thing for me not to do it. But that was the beginning of the story, man. I got to debut. Even better, they pushed it back. So I debuted in Madison Square Garden.
Nice.
Like, as a fighter, as somebody who came from boxing, there's nothing cooler than debuting in Madison Square Garden. So already in my UFC career, I fought in two of my three dream stadiums: Madison Square Garden, uh, the O2 Arena. I just need to fight in Saitama Super Arena in Japan, and I've got all three. So like, yeah, man, like I really thought I wasn't gonna make it. I thought like this was it. Like hard work isn't always rewarded, but everyone who's rewarded has worked hard. And
Yeah.
like, unfortunately, like not you can do all the work, you can suffer, put all the suffering in, but it doesn't entitle you to anything. And I unfortunately thought that like, it wasn't meant to be, but the universe did me a favor and I got my opportunity and I ran with it.
Absolutely. I think we've got about 5 minutes left on the Zoom, so I'll let you know when we're up. But yeah, man, that's such a great story, man, and it's interesting because people hear that story, but it's not always the story. A lot of guys don't have it that tough. A lot of guys did not pay their dues like you did. I always cheer for a guy like you that does because I've been that guy. I always been that guy. Or seeing this or that person get this break and they're like, for me, it's like, oh, keep grinding. And it's like, oh, great. I'm the guy. I'm that
Keep
guy.
grinding. We're the keep grinding guys. Like
Yeah,
my
exactly.
mother always said, she's like, she said, I worry about you, but I've always knew you get to where you go, but you've always taken the scenic route to get there.
Yeah,
And I'm like,
yeah.
well, it's
That's it. It builds character, man. That's why we got character. Actually, it looks like we got like 8 more minutes, if that's okay. Can you stay with us for 8 minutes?
totally, yeah, totally
I,
fine.
I appreciate it, man. Yeah. So when you had all those fights, it gave you a lot of experience, and also you had not really tightened up your wrestling as much. So do you feel that right when that first break came, that was the perfect time? Were you ready? Maybe one or two fights before that? What would have happened if you would have got the break 3 or 4 years early? I know there's like three little different questions there, but yeah.
It's so I thought about this a lot, and it's one of those things to where the it's kind of a catch-22. The UFC is a weird place.
Yeah.
The UFC is a place to where you have to learn on the job. Once you get there, there's a certain like skill level that once you get in that you're exposed to that you don't usually run into too much outside. So it's a little bit different now because they kind of get signing guys earlier, so it's more of a gradual build. You can have earlier guys fight each other, like, but before it was like foot in the door, good, like congratulations. Like my first fight was Phil Hawes, a dude who was like knocking me outside of rankings,
Yes. Yes.
and like so like yeah, it's deep in for me. And I think I kind of as much as I hate it, I think like had I gotten signed off of contenders, I would have had an issue because you have to learn on the job in the UFC, but at the same time, it's not a place you want to have to learn on the job.
Right.
So I think I could have done okay in some fights, but in other fights I would have struggled a lot more. So skill wise, I'm still learning now. Like I'm fighting at 185. I'm at a weight class that's above my natural weight.
Right.
So even now, I'm having to relearn how to fight. I'm having to learn new things, and like I've had to change my entire style because it's a completely different thing. So I think 4 years ago, I may have had some issues, especially. I hate, getting signed. Look at that, what, 33, I think, whatever, 32. But skill wise, I think I was in a better place to like be able to succeed. But at the same time, like I said, man, even now I'm having to relearn how to fight at 185. Like fighting at 185 and fighting at 170 are very, very different things for me. So, we're having growing pains now to where, we've had some issues and fights. So we're like, okay, like, back to the drawing board. We got to figure out, how to fight bigger guys. So I definitely think it's one of those things to where, as much as I hate getting, I'm not gonna have a 10-year UFC career, but skill wise, I think I'm gonna, have a better chance now than I would have had, out of contenders right away.
That's a good feeling. So I know you have a lot of content out there with your friend Sean Strickland. He's a unique guy.
Okay.
Love him or hate him. He's a character. The stuff he says, a lot of it's hysterical. And it's funny because you can tell that this is not stuff I don't think that's scripted. Like literally, he thinks it's
No,
some crazy shit and he says it, right?
I met Sean my first day at Team Quest when I'm trained in California, my first time out there. And this has been Sean for 7 or 8 years now, day one. And this is so we actually live next to each other.
Nice.
He's my neighbor. And I deal with this all day, every day. Like guys, like people laugh with Sean's standard, like, hey, let me tell you what your problem is. Like, no, this is how he begins. He'll walk into my home and say, like, hey, Kurt, let me tell you what your problem is. And I was like, thank you for knocking, which he does it. And I'm like, okay, like, he's like Kramer. He just opens my door and like walks in.
I love that. That's awesome. That's fun.
It's just how he is, man. It's just how he is.
Did you see the latest content he put out about Izzy, where he's calling him an Australian, which Izzy is from New Zealand, and then he says he's a Chinese man, which is very interesting. And then Sean says he's more Australian than Izzy, who's from New Zealand, so he could be more Australian than. Although the content,
Guys,
what do you think?
I'm telling you now, like, don't try to like make sense of the things Sean says. If you go too far down the rabbit hole, you're just like, how did we get here? Like this, I've since had to learn. Like there's sometimes he'll say, I just walk away. I'll just walk away and start talking. Like I'm not gonna be dragged into your insanity.
Right.
Yeah. So yeah,
And
but him versus Izzy should be fun. That's the press conference for Sean versus Izzy is going to be legendary.
yeah, I can imagine that's going to be so epic. And I think Sean's got a good chance there. You know, a lot of people like to jump on one side, and of course, Izzy's an established champion, and all you guys say, "Oh, Sean's got nothing for Izzy. These jokes are not going to work in the cage." But Sean isn't really joking in the cage. That's one thing you can see is that he is there to fight, and I think that fight could be interesting. One of the things that you and Sean both have is a great composure in the cage. Like both of you feel like it's home. I'm sure everyone gets nervous. You're in a fight. You could get hurt, so no one's got cold water in their veins. We all are warm blooded, but it seems like both of you guys feel so much at home. I know we're down to 4.5 minutes left, but give me a short answer. Somewhat short, at least. Did that take a long time for you to feel that way? And how do you, certain guys like you and Sean, have that comfort level that some of these fighters, most fighters, don't really have?
So it kind of feeds back into our last topic about guys getting in too early. Like you see guys who get in the UFC with 4 or 5 fights, pro fights, and what happens? You go in there and when they're winning, they're doing great, but when things go wrong, what happens? You see them kind of come apart, right? That composure is something I pride myself on. I know Sean does too. I pride myself on my composure. Even when I'm losing a fight, you'll never see me look concerned or whatever, because I have sparred thousands upon thousands of rounds. I have fought so many days back to back. I've got, if you add my amateur, like MMA, boxing, I'll pro and amateur together. I'm coming up on.
Chris, looks like you froze there. Chris, can you hear me? It looks like you froze. Possible that your phone may have died. I'm not sure. It is possible. And if so, then we're still okay because it was a really good interview. And I think that may have happened. I think Chris's phone may have died. And so I'm going to say right here, man, thank you so much, Chris Curtis. I really appreciate the amazing interview. We'll let the last couple of minutes take here just in case he can come back, but if not, thank you so much, Chris. Yep, I think his phone may have died, so he's out. So there we go, Chris Curtis, man. Good deep dive into the mind of the action man. What a super nice guy, genuine guy, Midwestern guy like myself, and really, really cool story. And I really hope you guys enjoyed the interview and, can connect with the action man even more. And I know I can. It's really good to know him and get him up and, love to catch him down the line. And again, so that's it for the Ultimate Fan Experience. This is Colin Crandall. I thank you guys so much for joining, and we'll see you next time. Peace.